Welcome to the new episode of r/Askreddit. What is a fact that you learned in grade school that has been disproven? When I was little, I was taught about the Brontosaurus, mighty long-necked plant eater of the dinosaurs. Later, I was taught that, whoops, they accidentally stuck some random bones together, and there was never any such animal. Later still, I recall hearing that, oh, actually, there was a Brontosaurus after all. Or was there? To this day, I'm still, as a 42-year-old man, unclear on whether or not there was ever such a thing as a Brontosaurus. The Brontosaurus story we learned as kids, that it was the wrong skull put on the skeleton, and thus a mix-up, was true. But scientists didn't want the name to go to waste, so they gave it to another long-necked plant eater that was discovered more recently. The taste bud zones thing. For those who don't know, we used to be taught that different zones of our tongue tasted different things. One part tasted sour things, one part tasted sweet, etc. It was ridiculous and disproven by anyone who had ever eaten food, but it was still in science books. I remember being taught that the reason we lick ice cream with the tip of our tongue is because that was where the sweet taste buds were. Cut to me thinking, how on earth anyone was going to lick ice cream with the back of their tongue? Gum doesn't sit in your system for 7 years. The first time I watched a colonoscopy in med school, I quietly affirmed this. Yup, zero gum. I mean, it theoretically could if you never took a If my grandmother had wheels, she would have been a bike. When I was in junior high in the mid 80s, our earth science textbooks had continental drift, and our teacher said, okay, so I need you to ignore all of chapter 4, or whatever it was. Plate tectonics has been the accepted theory taught in colleges for 10 years now, but K8 textbooks haven't caught up yet. I feel like the version of plate tectonics I learned was a tiny bit garbled compared to what kids learned 10 years later, but my teacher was directly pulling from college texts and published scientific papers and distilling it down for 6th graders, so more power to her. Since your last name is McGraw, was hers ill? Love how this is a double joke, both textbook publishing and country singers. In the early 80s we were told that we would soon use the metric system in the US. Still waiting. Remember the speed limit signs with big miles per hour and little kilometers per hour? And eventually they were going to swap size, then they just put all the old signs back. I-19 has distances in kilometers still. They left speed in miles per hour because, well, you know what we would do with speed limit signs that say 100. Where did we end up on you can see the Great Wall from space? Because at different points, that was both true and definitely disproven in various textbooks I had. The supposed fact was that it was the only man-made object that could be seen from space. That's certainly not true. There is no distance where you'd be able to see it, but not also be able to see other man-made objects. It's very long, but not particularly wide. This fact was also first claimed in 1754, stating that the Great Wall of China could be seen from the moon, more than 200 years before a human had gone to space to know if it was true or not. Humans are the only animals that use tools. Cow tools. And that, non-human, animals didn't have emotions, and couldn't feel pain. Reacting to pain by squealing or whimpering, or what looked like happiness in wagging a tail were really just reflexes or pre-programmed responses to stimuli like a machine. And only humans could feel love, not animals. Pre-Jane Goodall these were not uncommon beliefs, but even as a kid, it was obviously wrong to me. I had a dog. One time I really got into it with a teacher who insisted animals didn't have emotions. I argued but I was dismissed as anthropomorphizing. He even put it on a test as a question. True or false? Animals do not have emotions. Ugh, I knew it was BS, but I wanted the point. Goodall is an amazing person. She did so much good work for her field. I'm so convinced that animals have emotions that I believe emotions are the force behind some of what we call instincts. Why does mom take care of her babies? I believe it's because she feels love. Another example is the friendships animals form, sometimes different species. There's no instinctual reason for a baby deer to visit and hang out with a Labrador, so it must make them feel happy or content or love when near each other. Regardless of the source, anything on the internet was considered to not be a valid reference. But you can cheat by using the sources from a Wikipedia article. Wikipedia is pretty accurate and a safe source now. Some of my friends did an experiment and destroyed an article, changing stuff and putting memes in. Less than 15 minutes later, it was up and running again. We were taught that Rosa Parks didn't get up from her seat because she just got tired one day, that the entire action was the spontaneous action of a lone woman. In fact, the entire thing was scripted and choreographed. While Parks was a seamstress, she was also the secretary to the president of the local NAACP chapter. She was recreating the protest done by Claudette Colvin. The NAACP wanted Parks to recreate it because Colvin was very dark complected and a single mother. The NAACP thought Parks, who was lighter skinned, would appeal to white audiences seeing this on TV. People think these movements just happen one day because it's a very romantic idea that one day the people just revolt. There is always a ton of planning involved, and there is a lot of politics in that planning. Because a revolt can't work without the support of majority of people. Tongue maps. I swore I could taste bitter all over my tongue. My classmates said I was lying. Why would I lie about that? But now I wonder, Carrie, were you doing? Lying, Carrie? My teacher told me to shut up when I called her on this and said I could taste different things all over my tongue. Komodo dragon bites were deadly due to high concentrations of bacteria, not venom. Turns out that they are, in fact, venomous. Why does a big lizard need venom? 2. The snakes that are as big as a Komodo don't need it, and those don't live in Indonesia, where all the prey species are fun-sized snacks. Water buffalo are fun-sized snacks? That as a kid, strangers were going to constantly offer you drugs. Thank you, their program. Free drugs and quicksand were two things that were supposed to be a lot more common than they ended up being. Yeah, I wasted a lot of Saturday afternoons wandering the streets for nothing after dare. I remember learning that MSG, sodium glutamate, was really bad for you. It was one of those things I heard both at school and in my family to the point where we wouldn't buy any product that had MSG in the ingredients. There have been multiple studies showing no evidence of adverse health effects from MSG. There is a subset of people that report hypersensitivity to it, but in double-blind experiments, their symptoms tend to show up when they don't know they've eaten it. Conversely, their symptoms do show up when they think they've eaten it but haven't actually. Conclusion: MSG is literally just salt and glutamate protein, which is separately in just about everything you eat anyway. Meanwhile, I bought a big bag of MSG from a Chinese supermarket last weekend, so I can make all of my meals taste takeaway fresh. I was taught that in college, you will spend all of your study time in a library reading and researching, using books and reference catalogs. The internet was evil and full of lies, and not a valid resource for academic research. During the first week of my PhD program, I went to the library to do some research. That was in 2000. That was the last time I did this as an academic, and I'm a professor. It's a bit sad, because the library was my favorite place growing up in the community and at school. I remember searching through the physical card catalogs. Now, I can find the books and articles I need online. When I did my masters a few years ago, I got plenty of books for reference, including through IL. Back in my day, Pluto was still a planet. You heard about Pluto? Man, that's messed up. You know that's right. I've heard it both ways. Blood is blue in your veins, and only turns red when you bleed because of oxygen. I'm an embalmer and often see arteries and veins up close. Veins actually do appear blue in the body, but it's just the way the red color of blood is refracted through our semi-translucent tissue. You don't need to be an embalmer to see that. You just need to have light skin. Though we won't be walking around with a calculator in our pockets. Same with, you won't be able to look up the answers whenever you want. Fast forward to now, where we all have a calculator and computer in our pockets at all time. To be honest, I still say memorizing the times tablet still has benefits. The calculator in your pocket doesn't hold equations. That carrots make your eyesight better. This was in the early 90s. Apparently that was some BS that the British Air Force came up with in World War II as a way to trick Germans into thinking that was how they bombed so well at night, when in actuality it was new tech. Close. It was the RAF, but it was to hide the fact that they had better radar technology that allowed them to scramble fighters faster at night to intercept bombing runs. As an added bonus, it got the citizens to grow more of their own food. The food pyramid. What do you mean? Be sure to eat your 7 to 8 servings of spaghetti every day for optimal health. And the 5 liters of dairy, so you don't get brittle bones. And 3 cabbages, so you don't get constipated from all the dairy. We had lessons on how to get out of quicksand at school. I have no doubt that the method is valid, but the disproven bit for me is the need to know how to get out of quicksand. It really isn't an issue. In a similar vein, we had a lot of education about stranger danger. Again, not disproven, but much more valid would have been education about how much child abuse and abduction is committed by someone known to the victim. Australia's Most Wanted had me petrified to look out the window at night. Turns out the dangerous person wasn't lurking outside waiting to get in. He was a member of my family. Fun fact, if you go to Mont Saint Michel, Normandy, France, you may have to get out quickly. Tourists often wander into the Bay of Sands to get pictures, not knowing that the sea comes back up extremely quickly. As a kid, it was said to be faster than the fastest horse. It is not. Quicksand? You can't die in it, unless you dive head first, I guess, but you can be trapped, and the tide can drown you in it. A couple of years ago, they had to get tourists out using an helicopter. Goddamn, I'm Gen X. We learned that given then current rates of productivity, we'd all be working 3-day weeks by 2010. Without being told we'd be paid for 3-day weeks, or that our labor would be offshored to Chinese prison camps. They were right as far as productivity goes. They just didn't account for greedy companies being able to get away with stealing all of it. The entire food pyramid. Edit for clarification, I'm referring to the old 90s food pyramid that has been long abandoned for unhealthy portions of unhealthy foods. Never paid attention to it. They don't even teach it anymore. It's gone entirely, replaced by a plate that shows proper daily portions of different foods. Different portions in the pyramid, and I'm sure it will also be tossed out depending on whether we are calling eggs healthy or not again. Pluto was a planet. Also that random people would give me free drugs. Hey, kid, wanna try some drugs? Flings open trench coat. I've been waiting all my life for this to happen. If a man offers you free drugs, you say, thank you, cause that expensive. That you should tilt your head back when you have a nosebleed. I had so many nosebleeds as a kid, and like every time I'd have at least one person tell me this, and then another person tell me the opposite. I've had chronic nosebleed my whole life. My method is to pinch my nose, and then ball up a piece of tissue and plug it until it stops. Hasn't failed me yet lol. Eggs are bad because of cholesterol. Egg yolks specifically, which they claimed the cholesterol caused heart problems. Ironically, egg yolks are supposed to be very good for your heart, because the cholesterol they cause is good cholesterol, and they reduce bad cholesterol. Still to this day there are articles about them raising cholesterol though. It's more that dietary cholesterol doesn't really affect serum cholesterol. I was told there's no such fish as an alligator gar when I chose it for a report. The teacher refused to let me look it up on the internet. Very early at the time and untrustworthy or encyclopedia would take too long. So she asked the kid in the room, who was known for being into animals. He had never heard of it, so it couldn't possibly exist. I will never not be salty about this. I wrote a story about a girl riding her horse at breakneck speed in 5th grade. Mr. Gallimore said it should be neck-breaking speed and just wouldn't believe it was a word. I vehemently tried to defend my word, to no avail. I too will never not be salty about it. I had a college professor tell me that the Iran-Contra affair was a conspiracy theory. I'm a conspiracy theorist, and it never happened. I nearly punted his because my political science professor, who was right down the hall, studied under one of the prosecutors. That men have one less rib than women. Funny story. I knew a guy who did have one less rib on one side, due to an ATV wreck he said. We were hanging out in a group, and sharing random stuff, as you do when drinking as a young person, and he said how he had fewer ribs on one side. My idiot, raised Christian, said, dude you're not special, every guy has one less rib on one side. Duh. Cause of Adam and Eve. You could have heard a pin drop a mile away, it went so quiet. Mercifully instead of laughing the group just took it upon themselves to educate me, and the guys had me counting all their ribs as proof. The fact that someone will try to pressure me to smoke, or do drugs often. I feel more peer pressured into drinking oat milk or not eating meat than I do doing drugs. Plenty of peer pressure for alcohol, though. Yeah, you're right there. Being my age and choosing not to drink blows people's minds. I'm 40 and don't drink, well, not as a rule. I'll occasionally have an alcoholic beverage, but very rarely more than 2, and never more than 3, and only a couple times a year. My friends and family still try to pressure me to drink. It's been 10 years. You'll use cursive forever. I feel like I'm the only person on this planet that still writes in cursive. Join us, we hide in the shadows. Poetry night is Thursday at the old graveyard. There will be tea and cake. Putting Aboriginal children in schools was okay at the time, I was taught, and they wanted their children to go. The Aboriginals were treated with respect, and their traditions and values were protected. Canada in the 90s, more specifically my social teacher in grade 6 or 7. Pretty sure now that's not how it went down. This is what Australia pretty much did too. Took kids from their parents, forced them in schools to teach them how to be culturally European or civilized, then when old enough married them to Europeans to breed out the black. There's diary entries from people who whiteness is the stolen generation being taken. Mothers would scream, fathers would chase after their children, parents were killed too if they cried too much or tried taking back their children. Fixed amount of brain or heart cells after reaching a certain age. I remember being taught your eyes stay the same size as when you're born. More research into this has allowed stunting or stopping of myopia, which is generally an elongation of the eye. Those same drops used to dilate your eyes can be used in tiny doses in small children to slow the eye growth process, where rapid myopia may be occurring. It has helped my kids tremendously. They were changing -0.75 to -1 per eye per year since the drops for a couple years now. I think one eye has changed -0.25, and they, twins, only need them twice a week for a few more months before they are done. Margarine is better for you than butter. I still hear that one. I have a friend who is a world-leading researcher of fat. She won't allow margarine in her house as she says it's dangerous. Okay, you can't leave us with that. Why is it dangerous? We were taught in 3rd grade that MLK Jr. and his family died from a bomb being thrown through the window of his home after his "I had a dream" speech. A few years later, my mom said something about how he was shot and maybe there was a bomb thrown into his home, but that wasn't how he died. I told her that's not what happened. She told me I was wrong. I looked it up. I was lied to. His home was bombed, I believe after the bus boycotts, but no one was hurt in the attack. That's half true. His family home was bombed but nobody was hurt. Just ignore the bullets and they'll go away. You can be anything you want to be when you grow up. Just ignore the bullets and they'll go away. Well, I left the parish so long the school closed, and they fired the Pope, so maybe they weren't wrong on that one. They're only being mean because they are jealous of you. That frogs don't feel pain because they don't have skin like humans do. I think the middle school science teacher who said this was just to calm down some upset kids during frog dissection day. The frogs were alive, not after dissection day. I'm now under the impression that we did not, in fact, have a nice friendly Thanksgiving dinner with the Native Americans. This one is actually true though. Relations between the Pilgrims and the Native American tribes were actually pretty good until King Philip's War in the 1670s. Coincidentally, the only monarch you can also use as a screwdriver. Dinosaurs are cold-blooded. I'm finding all sorts of conflicting reports on this up to even last year. Apparently the question is far from settled, but it seems established they were definitely not all cold-blooded. Chickens certainly aren't. Until you cross them. So, running list. Lie. The 5 tastes are sweet, sour, spicy, salty, bitter, and they are arranged in patches. Truth. Spicy is handled by a completely different mechanism than the others, and the true 5th taste is umami, an originally Japanese term that can roughly be approximated as savory, and also the taste buds are dispersed throughout the surface area of the tongue indiscriminately. Additional fun fact, each taste evolved to identify specific important information. Equals sweet means easy source of energy, sour means rotten or overripe, bitter means poison, salty means important dietary minerals, and umami means key amino acids. Lie. There are 3 states of matter: solid, liquid, gas. Truth, there are a lot more, including plasma obviously, but also a bunch that exist exclusively in pressure plus temperature conditions that do not normally exist outside a lab, volcanic caldera, middle of a glacier, core of a star. That is not where your average person is likely to go. Lie. You have 5 senses: touch, taste, hearing, smell, sight. Truth, you have a bunch more, including but not limited to proprioception, the human body's ability to sense itself separately from the other senses. This sense allows you to walk without looking at your feet and write or type without looking at your hands. Thermoception, the ability to sense changes or variances in temperature, separate from touch or pain. Equilibrioception, your ability to sense gravity or tell up from down regardless of your position or your other senses. Lie. Pluto is a planet. Truth, scientists have a tendency to jump the gun when they find something new, often in a rush to get credit for discovering it, and later generations then discover that things may have not been as they'd assumed. In Pluto's case, it is actually an object in something known as the Kuiper Belt, a ring of frozen rocks and comets at the edge of our solar system that is not unlike the asteroid belt in the middle of it, and in fact when telescope technology advanced to the point of being able to see past Mars, back in the day, scientists actually started declaring things to be planets that today we clearly recognize as asteroids until someone stopped to reassess the definition of planet and whether these objects qualified. The difference with Pluto is that 1. Telescope technology accelerated rapidly, but then slowed down to a more reasonable pace, and 2. The further you go out in the solar system, the more things tend to get spread out in relation to each other. So the facts of what kind of space object Pluto was, and the fact there were more Pluto-like objects didn't become known for quite a while, enough for Pluto to cement itself in the public conscious. You can't use a calculator for this lesson. You won't be walking around with one in your pocket when you're older, so you need to learn how to calculate without one. Still a valuable skill. If someone can't multiply 7 into 9 without a calculator, no one would think that's a positive in society versus the old-fashioned way. I tutored math for many years. The number of times I saw someone pull out a calculator to multiply by 10. Oof. Far too many to count. Elementary school was 1970s for me, and apparently the folks that wrote our textbooks and curriculum in the 50s and 60s were entirely full of high on mushrooms and or pulling facts out of their. I have a children's picture dictionary from Spain in the 70s that says things like, "What you certainly can't trust is what the Negro says." I was around 8 years old, and I found that comment racist enough to think about it now and then throughout my whole life. Recently, during a visit to my parents' house, I checked the book and looked for the specific quote. Yep, I remembered correctly. I've got 2 good ones. I had a social studies teacher tell me that Asian eyes were slanty because it was a defense mechanism for sand blowing in the wind. This was who taught topics like history and geography. She also said some other racist stuff against Asians that I won't repeat here. That same teacher told us that the city of Buffalo was named by taking the original Native American name for the land Belle Fleuve, which is French for beautiful river or something, and mucking it up. I never questioned why Native Americans were giving things French names. Anyways, in hindsight I now realize she was a terrible teacher. In regards to Asian eyes, the epicanthic fold, it being a genetic adaptation for particularly windy places such as the Tibetan Plateau, is still one of the theories. Personally, I think sexual selection is the most likely reason. If it's good enough for blue eyes, it's good enough for other eyes types. Christopher Columbus knew his. He thought he works was way smaller than it actually was. Everyone thought he was nuts because ancient Greeks had already calculated the size of the planet and were surprisingly accurate, except for assuming the planet to be a perfect sphere, which it isn't due to the spin. He also thought that Asia stretched east much farther than it really did. I think he assumed one of the Caribbean islands was Japan. Well, for the record, he was a pretty damn good sailor. Using the techniques he has at the time like dead reckoning, he navigated largely unknown waters. Just a pity he committed genocide once he landed. That the teachers in the next grade up will not slow down. I remember hearing that in middle school, high school teachers and college professors were super chill and helpful most of the time. Was told this too. My math teacher would stop teaching and rant for 30 minutes about how college is going to be tough and everyone needs to grow up. I have a feeling she dropped out after middle school and based her assumptions off of middle school teachers. I heard something like that too. I was told in 6th grade that when I got to high school, teachers would move at a breakneck pace and won't stop if you're having trouble, and it's 100% on us to figure out how to handle a situation where we are struggling with what is taught. If anything, it was the opposite of that. Respect those in authority. The government, your company, your boss have your best interest at heart. If you work hard and play by the rules, you'll get ahead. To add on to this, you can always trust teachers, police officers, your parents, etc. And I guess there's quite a bit of nuance too, that's hard to explain to kids, but it would have been nice if we were taught what kind of behaviors from trustworthy adults were not okay. I dealt with a lot of abuse from teachers and my principal when I was younger. Thankfully nothing physical, aside from not being allowed to get lunch sometimes. I thought that they were trying to do what's best for me, so even though I hated it, and it made me miserable, I should probably just deal with it. And they definitely would have told my parents about it too, because why would they keep it a secret? Cracking your knuckles gives you arthritis. I had a teacher who would make you miss recess if he caught you cracking anything really, but especially knuckles. He found that worse than cracking your back or neck. Didn't make sense. A guy spent his whole life cracking the knuckles on just one hand to see if it got arthritic. It did not. I thank him every time I crack my knuckles without fear. My own anecdotal evidence would seem to suggest that cracking your joints prevents arthritis. I started having symptoms of an autoimmune arthritis condition at age 21, and 16 years later I still crack my fingers, toes, ankles, and wrists regularly, and they're the only joints so far completely unaffected by the arthritis. My mom used to always say that muscle soreness from exercise was due to lactic acid. Now it's because of micro tears in the muscle. I thought the acute immediate part was the acid, and the lasting part was the tears being repaired. Is that wrong? That is what I thought too. The burn in the moment is lactic acid. The soreness the next day or two is minor tears in the muscle being repaired. George Washington treated his slaves well. Silver lining, at least you learned he had slaves at all, and didn't gloss over that detail. Yup. And that he had wooden teeth. Nope. He had 2 sets of teeth. The first pair was made from various animals, like donkeys. The other pair was made from human teeth, slaves' teeth. Thank you.